carpet's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away. Oh.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Terror Obscura, the show where we look at the best and worst horror has to offer. I'm your host, the Fear Fan, and thanks for tuning in. Well, here we are at the end of an era. During the season of Terror Obscura, I've charted the course of Jason Voorhees and assorted friends over the course of 7 movies. Back in season 1, I'd already gone through Freddy Krueger's death spin-off and was working on his remake by now. Still, Jason's always been a little less fleet of foot, vacations to California notwithstanding, and by this point in his series, audiences were starting to feel the strain of the journey. By now, we'd seen Jason take a bath, go on his first murder spree, develop a keen fashion sense, die, get struck by lightning and come back to life, and get his ass kicked by yet another teenage girl. It was an exhausting journey, and while the last 2 movies were big hits with fans, and in one case the critics, the box office never quite recovered from Mr. Roy's wild ride in Part 5. So, with profits on the decline, Freddy vs. Jason languishing in development hell next to its proposed leads, and pretty much every iteration of the Jason legend run through, there was only one thing left to do. Road trip! Yes, in a move unprecedented since the rumored, and wisely discarded, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian the previous year, the higher-ups at Paramount decided that it was high time that Jason take a bite out of the Big Apple with Jason Takes Manhattan. The film was slated to pit Jason against the Muppets, who had taken Manhattan 5 years previously after beating a zombified Fiorella LaGuardia to death in The Muppets Take Manhattan. It's been a while since I've seen that one. Looking to bring this battle royale to the big screen, Paramount tapped Rob Hedden, a former screenwriter who had directed a few episodes of Friday the 13th, the series, as director. Upwardly mobile, looking to make his mark, and handed the keys to what was shaping up to be one of the world's longest-running horror franchises, Hedden snagged fan fave Kane Hodder and set out to make what, by its title alone, promised to be the most ambitious film in the series to date. Hell, Paramount even launched a massive marketing campaign tying in with the famous I Love New York campaign. Unfortunately, it seems New York did not love them back, as they quickly asked that the campaign be pulled, presumably to avoid misrepresenting New York, whose serial killers tend to have either a law enforcement theme or a stupid duck voice.
Somebody called for you.
Yeah, who?
The guy with a strange voice. Said he'd call you back. He sounded just like a duck.
Just like a duck.
And honestly, having already changed the nature of the killer and his enemies, switching out the location where we spent the last 7 movies seems like a great idea. But, while if Jason can make it there, he can make it anywhere, the previous innovations had failed to fix the series' foundering profits. So, the question remained, would audiences love New York? Or would this costly foray to the world's crossroads shut production down in a New York minute? There's only one way to know for sure, so let's tune in and find out. Last time, we started out with a recap courtesy of Crazy Ralph, so let's see who they got this time.
It's like this. We live in claustrophobia. A land of steel and concrete. Trapped by dark waters.
Shit, is that Leonard Cohen? They really did go all out this time. Hey, it's almost enough to keep me from noticing that none of that made any damn sense. Speaking of things that make no sense, I have no idea why the New York Board of Tourism wouldn't want to adopt this film unconditionally. In less than 5 minutes, we get to see all the sights. Times Square, a mugging in a filthy alleyway, barrels of toxic waste. Hey, by the time we get to the heroin addicts, there's no need to schedule a trip, because I feel like I've already been there. Also, it's interesting to note that this is the first film in the series where the credits actually play out across the movie rather than a static background. Weirdly enough, I kind of miss it. Okay, fuck that. Out with the old, in with the new. And speaking of the old, once we finished our little tour of NYC, it's back to Crystal Lake, where it looks like business as usual as local contractors have once again been hard at work erecting a 3rd building on the remains of Tina's house, and the Crystal Lake teenagers are hard at work erecting something entirely different. Also, it seems that our hard rock intro and the narrator are both part of a radio program stretching clear from New York to Jersey.
The electricity of Manhattan. This request has gone all the way out to Crystal Lake. in the senior class at Lakeview
That's
High.
us.
All right.
Okay, number one, I'm pretty sure there are more interesting things going on in New York City than Lakeview High's graduation trip. And number two, how in the fuck are you getting a crystal clear signal from Manhattan all the way out to the mountain lakes of Jersey? Maybe someone slipped him a 50 to deliver exposition, a task which our topless teen twosome is more than happy to deliver for free.
There was this boy named Jason Voorhees, drowned in Bristol Lake about 30 years ago. None of the counselors heard him.
Wow, cool story, but just one question. Who the fuck is that? Is Jason hiding behind that kid, or... No, sadly, that is our new Jason, and yes, it is an indication of the quality of things to come. So apparently, not content to dig up Jason metaphorically, Jim, for so our curly-headed companion is named, drops anchor and quite literally dredges up the past when a frayed power cable once again raises him from the dead. Oh, and while I may have had a good laugh at the incompetence of the services at Crystal Lake, I have to hand it to their power company. Whoever laid that fairly new-looking power cable right next to the inert body of a legendary serial killer and didn't even bother reporting it to the police has to have balls of steel on the job. Anyway, after losing his bling, Jason's back and better than ever. No. I mean, really. Apparently, he's got a perfectly normal pinky and thumb on his slime-caked mitts now, not to mention that he's had another visit to the tailor since we last saw him. And after that flashback to a not deformed at all child Jason, I have to wonder what else is regenerated.
Got you good, Susie.
Oh, great. First came the sexy vampires, then the sexy zombies, now the sexy slasher villains. Where will it end, Hollywood? Where will it end? So, as Jim and Susie debate over whose hair is prettiest, Jason snags a mask, somewhat implausibly covered with exact replicas of the damage from previous movies, and decides to revisit a classic kill from the first time he went full goalie. Well, after a decade and a half underwater, it's no wonder his aim's a little bit off. To be honest, I'm surprised he still knows how to use a spear gun. Kind of proves my point, but still effective. And while his aim with the spear gun is pretty good, he's not above cheating to put the actual spear where he wants it. With the most annoying scream in the series taken care of, Jason is now free to enjoy his new pleasure boat. And as I enjoy the mental image of Jason tooling around Crystal Lake on his new yacht, running down swimmers while blasting the lonely islands on a boat from the speakers, it's time to meet our survivor girl, Rennie, and her teacher, Catherine, who has more than her fair share of confidence in her pupil.
Stephen King supposedly used it in high school. And if there's anybody that can make use of that pen, it's you.
What's that? Oh, no, not in creative writing. That pen's got a busted inkwell, and with Rennie's scores in Metal Shop, if anyone can make use of that pen, it's her. Also, I'm pretty sure she got ripped off, unless Stephen King was the one Dickensian child in his classroom using a fountain pen. We also get a glimpse of Ensign Crazy Eyes, who's supposed to be a spooky doomsayer, but is probably just wondering how the fuck that boat made it from Crystal Lake to the Atlantic fucking Ocean. And yes, I know that most lakes are fed and drained by rivers and streams, but to avoid running aground, that means that my joke about Jason piloting his boat around looking for people to murder was actually accurate. There's also Charles, Rennie's uncle and Colleen's fellow teacher, who is so uptight that he probably hasn't farted since 1973. He's none too happy that Rennie's decided to take her senior trip for unspecified reasons that probably have nothing to do with him not wanting to be stuck on a boat with Rennie. There's also Sean, Rennie's boyfriend and the son of the ship's captain. Odds are they bonded over their mentor's somewhat unjustified confidence in them.
Something old and something new. I used that sextant when I was your age. Now they got those goddamn computers that do all the work for you.
Have you decided on a plan of departure, Captain?
Okay, not quite, but not far off as Nick does flub it. There's also his friend. He exists! And As Jason makes his way aboard, probably using his innate killer instinct to suss out where the biggest concentration of diverse partying teens is, we learn that Sean's dad isn't the only one with misgivings about this journey.
This voyage is doomed.
Wait a second. Could it be?
You're doomed if you stay here.
It is! Given Crazy Ralph's age when we last saw him, the fact that they mentioned he had a wife, and the fact that this film takes place in the early 2000s due to Part 7's chronological shenanigans, we may well be looking at the son of Crazy Ralph. I'm gonna call you Crazy Ricky. And I've gotta say, as the ship pulls out of port and we see the Lakeview High graduating class partying down, I'm kind of impressed at the size of the Crystal Lake class of 2000. I guess those abstinence-only and drug-free programs are more effective when they're backed up by a 7-foot-tall maniac in a hockey mask with a machete. And while we won't have time to meet most of them, we are introduced to Wayne, a geeky proto-Tarantino film enthusiast, and JJ, who is determined to put the V in Flying V. It looks like Wayne is also doubling as the errand boy for some as-yet unseen hottie named Tamara, much to JJ's disdain.
She is a user.
She's sexy.
So what? So's his guitar.
And that may be, but I'm willing to bet that he'd have a better time having sex with his than you would having sex with yours. And speaking of being fucked, JJ fails to notice the slightly sketchy new groupie following her around as she heads to the engine room, whose acoustics she thinks might improve the sound of her performance. Given that she's surrounding herself with humming electrical equipment and high-powered diesel engines, I'm inclined to agree. Still, strong decision-making skills aren't emblematic of the rockstar lifestyle, as she's taken up hair metal while living in a town terrorized by a killer that is literally drawn in by sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Sure enough, Jason shows up and decides to show her a real power chord by going Pete Townsend on her ass. Hey, given how she was talking about that thing earlier, this is probably the least painful way that that guitar could have wound up inside of her. As Jason turns a flying V into a thudding V, it looks like Rennie is using that pen to do to the written word what JJ's guitar was doing to her skull. Stopping for a moment to admire her massacre of the English language, Jason moves on, figuring that enough damage is being done without his help. That doesn't mean that he's leaving her alone though, as it's time for us to once again cross paths with Jason Jr., who apparently skipped his turn in the makeup FX chair again. You know, I'm not sure who comes off worse in this. On one hand, there's Rennie, whose dog is clearly more aware of the situation than she is, and on the other, despite having a normal face, the kid is still somehow fugly enough to send dogs scampering from the room. Elsewhere, we finally get to meet the last three of our crew on this particular ship of fools. There's Julius, who, due to the lack of a proper-looking Jason, is trying to pound his friend's face into a decent likeness, and the aforementioned uber bitch Tamara and her wannabe tag-along Ava. And if you need their personalities in 10 seconds or less... Stunning. I wonder what Charles thinks of these kids. He may be a bit of a dick, but he has spent more time with them than anyone else.
Well, senior predictions started 5 minutes ago and she hasn't shown up yet.
Oh, well, maybe some of us don't want our futures predicted.
Well, in your case, I'm sure that's true.
Tell me about it. One moment you're being voted most likely to succeed, be famous, or shine, whatever that means, and the next, some chuckling idiot is psychically manipulating a junkie into smashing your windshield as part of a complex scheme to get diorama-themed revenge on you and your friends for narking on his arts and crafts project when you were 8. Why yes, I am still pissed about how stupid amusement was. So while Tamara and Ava are busy figuring out who's most likely to get a deviated septum, Rennie searches for her dog, who continues to prove smarter than her by appearing in as little of this movie as possible. And while the dog calls may not be terribly effective at bringing Toby back, they do get someone's attention. Uh-oh, looks like someone smells the sausages in her pocket. And he's apparently not the only one who can sniff out teen indiscretion, as Mr. McCulloch comes across the Nose Candy twins as they finish up.
I'll be coming around to your stateroom in exactly 15 minutes, Miss Mason, so you better have your biology project ready or I'll be phoning your parents.
Would you be willing to accept a study of the effects of cocaine on teenagers? And I know we're supposed to hate McCulloch because he's a bit of a jerk, but until he has his Dr. Cruz moment, being a bit overprotective of his clearly emotionally fragile niece and being pissed at his students for doing cocaine isn't quite enough for me to not be on his side. So, as Tamara plots her revenge, we see that Jules' personal punching bag is enjoying a relaxing stay in the sauna. Of course, he doesn't have time to get too comfortable, as it's not too long before Jason shows up to let him know that it's time for a rematch against Rocky. So while he may be suffering from a bad case of heartburn, Rennie is dealing with issues that are a little more emotional in nature.
Hey, if you can't trust me, who can you trust?
Well, clearly not fucking her. To make matters worse, the great and abiding fear that Rennie has that made her uncle so nervous about her coming on this trip is a fear of drowning, a fact that young Jason takes great pleasure in exploiting before Sean finally drags her waterlogged carcass out.
I can't swim.
You ever thought about taking lessons?
It's not that simple.
Yeah, I'd imagine that the first time you go to the Y and a creepy ghost boy pops out of the water to grab some ankles, you're probably not going to be invited back. And believe me, you don't even want to know how she has to use the bathroom with this shit going on. So, before she can explain to Sean why she hasn't taken a bath in 10 years, Uncle Charles shows up, and because she missed her senior predictions, he brought a friend.
He's come back, and you're all gonna die.
Huh, that's exactly what the valedictorian said at my graduation. Feeling a little overwhelmed by the situation, Rennie needs a bit of private time and retreats to the restroom to rinse off despite her recent swim. As it turns out, that's not the best idea when you're being haunted by a ghost kid that pops out every time you so much as look at a puddle. And sure enough, after the faucet's time of the month comes around, Jason pops out yet again, big as life, and finally twice as ugly. Although I've gotta ask, what is up with that makeup? He looks like he knew people were disappointed in his first couple of appearances, realized he only had 5 minutes before he had to pop out of a mirror, and slapped some tan Play-Doh over one eye to convince people he was the real deal. Also, you keep calling her mommy. I'd be a little bit careful, dude. Last time you made that mistake, it didn't work out so well for you.
Good Jason.
Speaking of desperate and unconvincing, it's time for Charles to check in on Tamara, whose biology project simultaneously leaves little to the imagination and much to be desired.
What do you think you're doing? Now you stop that. I mean, really?
Hate to tell you this, but I tried the same thing in high school biology, and Mr. Murray was not impressed. And of course, such tactics are useless against a man that's about as sexless as a Ken doll, but thankfully there's a plan B as Wayne swoops in, camera in hand. They make him a deal. If he promises to make them high school graduates, they promise not to make him a porn star. Emboldened by their success, Wayne makes a pass at Tamara, only to find that JJ was a much better advice columnist than a musician.
I've had the major hots for you since our sophomore year, Tamara.
That's so sweet, Wayne.
Wayne? You're an asshole.
Dude, she just casually walked away after possibly murdering a girl that might have narked on her. If the boat had been moving, she would not have survived. Also, I love how Jason just seems to be hanging out in every doorway our characters pass by, just waiting for his cue.
Wayne? You're an asshole.
Did someone say asshole? And while Wayne may have drawn his attention, Jason's douchebag sense is tingling, and it leads him straight to the trifecta of bitchy, on drugs, and taking a shower after making out. After the world's most mild reaction to seeing a 20-year-old rotting corpse getting ready to rifle through her panty drawer, Tamara's stunt double takes a nasty knock on the head, and finally starts to get the point as Jason tells her to take a good look in the mirror. Relax, I'm pretty sure that he just wants to check the accuracy of your biology project. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm getting a little bit antsy. So far we've seen Jason take a mask, take a boat, take a walk, take a spa day, and take a robe, but so far he has failed to even request Manhattan, let alone try to take it. In fact, while we're waiting to get closer to New York, I'm going to take a little something myself. A break. See you in part 2.
I'm on a boat, everybody look at me, 'cause I'm sailing